Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today we are with Bernard Sampson. He's a National Committee member and Harris County Chair of the Communist Party USA. Bernard, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and thank you for asking. I hope you're doing well as well.
Well, I am doing fine. Communist Party. In America, people are supposed to fear you. Anything that has the word communist or anything that has the word socialist, you're a scary person. Are you a scary person, Bernard?
Oh, I don't think so. Maybe to fascist, maybe to people like Trump, maybe to the far right.
Yeah, because I mean,
America.
The reason I wanted to have you on is that I've been watching, I watch a lot of what, recently it's mostly online, but watching what a lot of people are doing online. And with all these things that are happening, I've seen a whole lot of groups getting together and getting a whole lot of stuff done. And what I've seen people that identify themselves as communists, people that identify themselves as democratic socialists, people that identify themselves as socialists, and people that identify themselves as Democrats, and some crazy Republicans, because there are a couple of crazy Republicans that come to DSA. And, isn't this what America should really be? Where everybody with their ideologies can somehow merge together?
Well, I don't know. I think that on the left and the progressive movement at this stage in history of struggle against capitalism, we need to have broader unity, there's no doubt. But I don't think there's a place for the far right and for fascists in this.
Oh yeah, well, when I don't think fascist is a natural thing. In other words, just like I don't think a lot of bad things come naturally. It's always interesting to me, right? Because you remember Gekko on that movie. I don't know if you saw that movie called Wall Street. Gordon Gekko from Wall Street.
A while back I saw it.
Right. In that movie, Gekko says, greed is good. And capitalism is based on that tenet that greed is good. And I've always sat down and wondered, Bernard, if folks are so greedy, how comes there are just a few people at the top? Wouldn't everybody that's greedy be trying to take everything?
There's an old joke. There's two workers in front of a factory in England, and the boss drives in on a Rolls Royce. And one worker looks at the other and says, one day we're going to take that from him. Then in the United States, there's two workers in front of a factory. The boss drives in on a Cadillac. One worker looks at the other and says, one day I'm going to have one too. That's the difference in psychology here in the United States compared to most of the world, to some degree.
Actually, I think it's true. Unfortunately, I was talking to Eleanor Goldfield. She is a real strong activist out there and a filmmaker in Washington, D.C., and she said she's originally from Sweden, and she said, unfortunately, that right-wing cancer is starting to spread to places like Sweden, which had very fairly good social safety nets for their people, etc. What's your thought about the directionality that we have today? Are we surging left or are we surging right?
Well, there's a huge people's movement, and we saw it in the demonstrations against police brutality around George Floyd and Breonna and others. And we also have a movement that's going together of the right wing, of the far right, the militias and the et cetera, the people around Trump. So we have this polarization that's happening in the country. And what is this fight over? People say, well, it's a Democrat versus Republican. Then why are some Republicans supporting the Democrats against Trump? And what I think it is there's a crisis in the United States. There's a crisis in neoliberalism. And what's happened is Trump has come forward and he grabbed, I guess, 33% of the population that Ted Cruz had. And, he took it from them. And he's built a base around that. And what they're saying we no longer need capitalist democracy, the democracy that we have now, which, by the way, as a communist, I don't believe the working class have. I don't believe people of color have ever had it. I think that what we have is democracy is for the rich, for the 1%. Is who democracy is for. They have CNN, they have Fox News, they have their debates.
Bernard, specifically because you are labeled a communist, I want to qualify something that you just said because I think it needs better expansion, but otherwise it will be misinterpreted. You said democracy is for that top 1%. I think what you're really meaning is democracy should be for us all, but in America, the only people that are living under a democracy are the ones at the top. Did I understand you right
That
or
is
not?
correct. That is, I was going to get to that. You're totally correct.
The reason I said that is because I don't know, maybe I heard wrong, but it was sounding like there's democracy, and then in your parlance, there's communism that doesn't believe in democracy. And I think if I understand your form of communism, what that is pure democracy.
Yes. Well, people misunderstand. As a Marxist, democracy is a form of the state. And in the world today, you have two types of states. You have capitalist states and you have socialist states. And then you have some states like Venezuela that are going from one to the other. They're transitioning, and it hasn't been decided who's actually going to win which class. And so you have democracy in both, and you have other forms in both types of systems. They can vary from country to country. Our democracy is not the same as the democracy in Germany or England or in the Philippines or Mexico, but they're all capitalist states. And democracy in China is not the same as it is, say, in Cuba, but they're both socialist states. So the state, what is the state? The state are armed bodies of men and women. It's a tool of oppression used by one state or used by one class to suppress another. Under socialism, the state apparatus, the police, the courts, and everything are used to suppress the capitalist class. It's not till you have a communist system, which we won't live to see, where the state itself disappears and people can actually be free. And people misunderstand these things. And most people think that the state is neutral. All you have to do is win the election, and the working class can then take control and then can run things. But the state has never been neutral. The state at one time never existed, and then it existed to justify inequality and some people having more than others. That's why they needed courts, religion, and armed bodies of men and women, so that a few people could keep what was produced. It's only under socialism that that begins to go away, but even that takes a long, long time. So the state is a necessary evil that we have under socialism and under capitalism. It's necessary for one class to stay in power. So that's a basic belief of communists, that the state is not neutral, it's a tool of oppression. But the form of state can be different. In the United States, bourgeois democracy, capitalist democracy, has been the best form for them to rule. But now there's an argument over it. And Trump is saying, we're going to take away bourgeois democracy. Now, does the working class have democracy? No. The civil rights movement, the right to form unions was never done through the vote. It was done through the struggle. Thousands of people dying, being lynched, going to prison, and being beaten. Every democratic right the working class has made has been through struggle and through the use of violence against us. And we force them to give it to us. And then in the next election, or two elections down, they take it away, just like they're going to do it with the Supreme Court now, against women, against people of color, and against the working class in general. And so this is why I say that the democracy is for the rich. They have total democratic rights. But Trump is saying, we don't need those anymore. We can't afford them anymore. What we have to do is we have to get rid of capitalist democracy. Now, is there a stake for the working class in capitalist democracy and keeping it going? 100%, because it gives us a place where we can struggle and force our class enemies to give us some rights so that we can march, so that we can organize, so that we can fight back and lessen the iron fist that falls on us from the capitalist class. So yes, we have a stake, but it's not the same democracy that would exist under socialism once the working class takes power. Imagine, instead of the police going through the Third Ward, they're going through River Oaks. That would be the difference, and it would be a different police force. So this is the big fight right now, and this is why some Republicans are joining with the Democratic Party to stop Trump, because they don't want to get rid of their democracy. You know, we say, we're the people that run this country. We're not going to let you decide that we can't do it. We can decide that the working class can't have it, but you can't tell us. Who do you think you are? So this is what this fight is over. And this is why it's important in what we call a popular front, where the left organizes with a sector of the capitalist class against the far right, against fascism. Our lives are at stake. Everything is at stake in this election. This is the most important election since the Civil War. And it's the closest we've come to civil war since 1861.
So you're saying that this alliance that you have with all the different all people of many different left ideologies coming together to take out the right, that is actually existential.
Yes, yes. You know, how does 1% rule over 99%? They split people through forms of racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. And they have us fighting among ourselves. But we also need to take advantage of differences among the ruling class, among our class enemies. And so when certain capitalists go with Biden and others go with Trump, we need to unite with those people because we're not strong enough on our own. The left, the working class is not strong enough to take power on its own. If it was, there would be a working class third party that would be strong enough to do it. And there's not.
They sure have, everything is rigged against that third party. Okay, for the person who's going to look at you and say, okay, you represent the Communist Party, let's look for examples. Let's look at Russia. Let's look at Cuba. Let's look at these places where communism seemed to have failed. What's the answer that you give them? If that's not really the definition of communism, that was just simply an aberration, or what?
Well, the first thing I'd look at is the United States. If you want to see how capitalism has failed, you're looking at it, living through it right now. As far as Cuba is concerned, you know, it's 90 miles off our coast, and there's been a U.S. embargo on Cuba since its existence. And yet, it's given free housing to trans members, it's to trans people. It's given free healthcare, free education. They export doctors all around the world. And their standard of living could be higher if we lifted that blockade against them. And so I'd say Cuba is a great success. And let's not compare Cuba to the United States. Let's compare Cuba to Ecuador, to Salvador, etc., where there's death squads, where there's squalor, where people have to flee and come here to even live. So I would say Cuba is a great example considering the conditions. As far as the Soviet Union was concerned, I lived there for a year in 1981. And I can tell you that after the Soviet Union fell, and this was a coup from inside, that after the Soviet Union fell, every single poll showed the majority of the people wanting the Soviet Union back. And in the first elections that Yeltsin ran, the Communist Party defeated him, but those elections were stolen. So yes, there's mistakes that are made under socialism, there's no doubt. There's mistakes made because people are people, and we make mistakes.
Wait, do you call Russia socialist or communist, and likewise Cuba?
Today?
Yeah.
Today,
no,
Russia,
not today. The Russia of '81.
Oh, of course, it was a socialist state. Cuba's a socialist state as well.
So what would be the difference if they were? You call them socialist and not communist?
No, there are no communist states. There cannot be one. You see,
because there's a state.
Yes, excellent. That's exactly correct. Communism is the elimination of the state. It's a much higher degree, and you can't have that as long as there's capitalism in the world, because there's a threat, an external threat, as well as an internal threat. So you still need the state for suppression.
So you actually share something in common with libertarians as far as wanting to be as stateless as possible. Am I right?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it.
Well, I mean, actually, they claim they want the government out, and they want laissez-faire, whatever. It almost sounds like, you know.
It's not the same thing. Libertarians want.
Oh, I know. I am playing devil's advocate here.
Oh, yes. No, it's not the same.
I understand the concepts. I just have to play the devil's advocate.
No, I totally understand. Well, you know, what do humans want throughout society? What people want is freedom. That's what they want. And freedom is, what is freedom? It's where you're not compelled to have to do things. Under capitalism and under socialism, you still have to go to work, you still have to obey laws, etc. And so compulsion is still part of life. So you can't be free. That's the real definition of freedom. And freedom won't exist until communism and the state, the tool of oppression, disappears. The question is who's oppressing who? When the 99% are oppressing the 1% and they're doing that to stop them from coming back into power, that's democratic because 99% are running the country for the first time. That's never happened in history except briefly in some of the socialist states and in the Paris Commune.
Now, there are concepts and then there's reality. All right, so let's build a city. Let's build a city. How do we build a city under the purity of communism as you see it?
Well, I can't really say about that on communism because it's hundreds of years in the future. We only know some certain basic things.
I know, but still, it's a concept that you understand.
I could say under socialism because it's been done. I mean, Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, most of that city was designed by Brazilian communists, the architecture, everything. And in the Soviet Union, cities were built from scratch under socialism. And what do these buildings have? When I lived there, if you were a worker, you generally lived across the street from the factory you worked at. And the apartment complex would have a free daycare for your children, so your wife could work as well. And the rent was maybe 3% of your income. What's the percentage of your income you pay now here in the United States for your rent? There was about 3%. Plus, you couldn't even be expelled from your house if you didn't pay the rent. It would take it up at your local union and try to shame you. Only if you were a traitor or something like that could you actually be expelled, because their constitution, it's a human right to have a home. It's a human right to have health care. It's a human right to have a job. It's a human right to have a free education.
Now, what I was really trying to get at is where we talk about having controls, right? We can independently build a skyscraper. We can independently do those things. How do we build the roads and so forth in that stateless state?
Well, again, under communism, I don't know. You have to understand that even socialism inherits everything that capitalism had, and it has to begin to solve it. I like to say that that bourgeois rights, like that we called for in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution, doesn't really exist for the vast majority of the population. Under socialism, bourgeois rights will now be recognized and enforced by law. And under communism, you just can't say. I mean, communism is something in the future that won't come into existence until there's enough produced and the distribution is democratic to where everybody can have stuff and there's no shortages. I mean, right now, under capitalism, because of the advance in technology under capitalism, we're able to actually create enough food to feed everyone in the world. So why do people starve? Because of the system of capitalism, because there's not a profit in the distribution. You see, we eliminate that. So capitalism sets up the basis through its techniques and its amount of production to give enough to where there is no scarcity under socialism. And
okay, Bernard, we're going to be wrapping up in a little bit, but I want to get some clarification here. You're the chair nationally of the Communist Party United States, not the Socialist Party USA. No. Tell me what is it that having a distinct party, not necessarily a party, but an organization labeling itself communist, as opposed to some merge with an organization that's labeling themselves socialist?
Well, we're proud to be communists, and we're proud of the role that communists have played in history in fighting against capitalism. I don't think there's any organization that has done what we've done, has given up the lives, people gone to prison from China to South America. No one has done as much as us. We're a Marxist-Leninist party. We're for socialism. We're at a stage right now where we're not able to achieve it, but the party is growing under Trump. You know, we're right now the largest actual party, left party in the United States, because DSA is not actually a party. We're between 9,000 and 10,000 members, and we're growing. Here in Texas, we have over 1,100 members, and we're growing everywhere. And the Communist Party is unique. It's different from DSA, from the Socialist Party, from the Revolutionary Communist Party, or Socialist Alternative. and that we work in the mass movements. And when I say we work in the mass movements, it doesn't mean we go to a demonstration and support. What it means is we are part of those organizations that do the demonstrations. We belong to within the trade union movement and within the civil rights movement. Plus, unlike any other left party, we're the most diverse party. Here in Houston, a third of our membership are people of color. Actually, closer to 2/3. On the exec, I'm the only white person on the exec in the Communist Party here in Houston. And that's how it should be. And that's because you have to organize the people that are the most oppressed under capitalism. It's very important. And you know, right now we have one goal, and that's defeat Trump. There's nothing more important in the next 30 days than stopping fascism from coming to the United States. And I'm not for voting for a third party or sitting out the election. To me, that does not help defeat Trump. You know, if you want to vote your conscience, wait till there's a less important election, in my own personal opinion. Let's unite. Let's work with Democrats. Let's work with anybody that's opposing Trump at this election. Because at this stage, if Trump wins, what does it mean for the trade union movement? What does it mean for civil rights? You know, if you want to see how bad things can get, you know, go back to the South. If you're a black person in the 30s and 40s, that's what it's going to be like for everyone, white, black, and Hispanic, if Trump wins. And nobody should kid themselves. This is not the same as fighting against Reagan. It's not the same as fighting against Bush. And yes, I don't think that, you know, there's anything perfect about Biden, but he beat Bernie Sanders. It doesn't matter how he did it. It's a fact. Biden is the only person that can defeat, and he's the tool we've been given by the DNC. Thank you, DNC. But he's the tool we've been given to stop fascism. So it's not up to Biden, it's up to us, up to the people. It's not up to the Democratic Party. It's up to the masses, to the trade unionists, to the civil rights workers, to go out there, to register to vote and get out there and vote. But not just vote, but to also organize in the streets and in your unions and your mass organizations. And when we get Biden elected, the struggle doesn't stop. But the question is, who would you rather oppose in the next 4 years, Biden or Trump? You may not even be able to physically stop and organize against Trump if he wins. It could be the last election in US history. This is very important, and people should understand that everyone needs to organize and win this election.
Bernard Sampson, as a Bernie Democrat, you are a friend. I'm talking politically now. You're a friend, not political as well. But I tell you, every Bernie Democrat, every DNC Democrat, every type of Democrat should be honored to have you as a friend, because you do hard work in the community. You put yourself all over this community, and I have seen the work that you've done. So keep up the good work. It's been my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right. Bernard Sampson, National Committee member and Harris County Chair of Communist Party USA.
And Egberto, I read your book. It's fantastic. I recommend everybody watching this read your book. It's a fantastic book.
Thank you so kindly, brother.
Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.